Hey y'all, this is SRN here, and I'm here to show y'all how to put together a good singles competitive Pokemon draft. There is a lot that goes into putting together a draft because there's a lot of moving parts. Team building is always complicated, and so I expect this video to take a while. But if you want to just have the too lazy, didn't watch 1 minute, most important takeaway, I think versatility is the number one most important thing to consider when you are creating a Pokemon draft, because at the heart of draft is the ability to counter team. Oh boy, did I even spell that right? Whatever. The heart of draft is the ability to counter team and adapt to whoever you are fighting in that specific week. Meaning that if you can't really have, if you don't have the Pokemon that are ready to adjust to a different team every single week, then your draft is just going to be less successful than someone who can adapt to your team and your whole everything. So versatility, that's a really grand concept, but I think that's also a buzzword. So I want to break down to you, what do I actually mean by versatility? How can you tell what Pokemon is versatile and what Pokemon isn't? And because if the buzzword sounds nice, but if you can't really differentiate between a Pokemon that's a one-trick pony and a Pokemon that can do a bunch of different things and do different meaningful things, then this guide isn't really going to be helpful. So I want to break down to you what I mean by versatility, and to do that, I want to use an example tier list. Let's just use the one that Draft Zone has together. This is the tier list for the singles Gen 9 Paldea Dex draft that I'm in right now, and I think this is not going to necessarily be a accurate representation of the draft or tier list that is in your draft. One of the wonderful things about draft is that a bunch of different communities can come together and make their own tier lists. They run it with their own friend lists and their own communities, and it's going to be different because people have different opinions on what Pokemon are good and what Pokemon are bad in a draft setting. Sometimes they're standardized, if you go to Smogon or whatever, but that's not always going to be the case. And so I think it's really important that you look at your own tier list and you come to your own conclusions on how good a Pokemon is. But that's an aside. Let's use an example of Garchomp, and let's compare that to Chi-Yu. Both of these Pokemon are in the 19-point category. I consider Garchomp to be versatile, and I consider Chi-Yu to not be versatile. So let's break down why exactly that is. Let's go to the team builder, and let's pull up Chi-Yu. So I think one of the best ways to really get an idea of what a Pokemon can do versatility-wise is just look at its move pool. And its stats also matter, its ability also matter, but if you don't have a lot of moves, if you don't have a wide move pool, then you're probably not versatile. That's just the simple fact of the matter. And what can Chi-Yu do? Now, it's obviously extremely strong with the Beads of Ruin, reducing special defense, 135 special attack. It's ridiculous. So you can expect it to output great damage on the special side with fire and dark moves. Fantastic. But what else can it do? What are its utility? It has an option to set up with Nasty Plot, but can it boost its speed? It has Flame Charge, which isn't great. What other coverage moves does it have? It has Psychic, which is something. If you have access to make Chi-Yu a Terra Captain, then Terra Blast gives you everything, but that's true for every Pokemon, so I'm going to sort of ignore that and set that aside. Its moves are kind of thin. Its move pool's thin. Ghost is hardly meaningful when you have Stab Dark coverage. It's really not getting you anything extra. When you look at its coverage options, it's kind of just Psychic and normal coverage, I guess, if you want to use Unstab Terra Blast, which isn't useful. Again, bounce doesn't mean anything. Like, you can just go through the list and you're not seeing much. What this means is that Chi-Yu is a Pokemon that can only really do one thing, and that is to be a special attacker with fire and dark stabs. And it has some like niche options like Taunt, Will-O-Wisp. You could do something like Flame Charge, Nasty Plot, but ultimately it's going to be doing one thing, and it's what it really comes down to with regards to versatility is that Chiyu could potentially have a few different sets. Like maybe you go heavy duty boots with the Will-O-Wisp, or maybe you go Choice Specs or Choice Scarf. Maybe you want to say Flame Charge Nasty Plot or Nasty Plot Sub. These are all technically different like move sets, uh, technically like different sets that Chiyu has. But if the answer to these different move sets are all going to be a similar or same pool of Pokemon, then it's not meaningfully different in terms of moveset. So, and let's again break that down with an example. Now, what's the, like one of the best answers to Chi-Yu you could say is not Slytherin. Let's see, where's my boy? Where's my boy? Where's Tyranitar? Wait, actually, where is Tyranitar? Hold on. Oh, 12 points. Yeah. Okay. So, Tyranitar in the 12-point category. That is probably the best. Oh, that's why I was confused. It's not alphabetical. Geez, let me organize this by name just for the sake of everyone involved. Oh yeah, Tyranitar. You go away. Tyranitar is probably the best Chi-Yu answer you could think of. Well, that's not true. I guess Primarina is right there. Sure. Let's look at Primarina, okay? Primarina doesn't care about Will-O-Wisp, has great special defense to tank the Fire and Dark moves, and even if you have a Specs Chi-Yu, even if you have a Scarf Chi-Yu, a Nasty Plot Chi-Yu, a Wisp Chi-Yu, Primarina really doesn't care about these variations in the moveset. Primarina, slap an Assault Vest, and it's probably going to pose as a very good check to Chi-Yu, no matter what kind of Chi-Yu set it is, which makes Chi-Yu not versatile. Now let's compare that to the other Pokemon I was looking at in the 19-point category, Garchomp. Garchomp is a Pokemon that I would consider very versatile. And that's not just because it has a bunch of different movesets, although it does. It's because those movesets are meaningfully different. So let's, for example, take a look at a special attacking or mixed Life Orb set. Something like Draco Meteor, Life Orb, Earthquake. We could throw in like Fire Blast, Stealth Rock. This is a pretty classic set. Now, this set is going to be meaningfully different from another Garchomp set, which could be something like Loaded Dice with Swords Dance, Scale Shot, Earthquake, and maybe like Sub, okay? This is a wholly different set in terms of how you try to answer Garchomp. And, you know what, let's throw in a third one just for good measure. We can even make a defensive Garchomp with something like Rocky Helmet, Rough Skin, Stealth Rock Spikes, Dragon Tail, and Earthquake. This is a completely different set from the other two as well. Now, in terms of what Pokemon that you would use to answer Garchomp, let's think about this. Defensively, how would you try and switch into the offensive threat that is Garchomp? Well, let's take a look at Corviknight, right? Steel Flying, fantastic defense, resists both of Garchomp's stabs. A Corviknight is going to completely wall a Swords Dance set that looks like something like this. Swords Dance, Scale Shot, Earthquake, Substitute. Corviknight doesn't really care about this. However, if you switch it up and you look at something like the Life Orb Fire Blast set, well, Corviknight is just going to get cooked by Life Orb Fire Blast, and then it's not going to answer Garchomp. So already you're seeing the differences in between an answer to the SD set loses to the mixed Life Orb set. And then if you want to go vice versa, the strengths of the SD set are that it can sweep, because Swords Dance can boost double your attack, and then Scale Shot can increase your speed by one stage. It has a completely different strength, whereas you could maybe rely on revenge killing the mixed Life Orb set with something like a Dragapult. If the Garchomp has a speed boost, well, you can't revenge kill it anymore with Dragapult. That's a meaningfully different answer that is necessitated because Garchomp has a different set. And if, let's say, Garchomp isn't running into a good matchup, let's say that you are, let's say that you're running into, maybe the team has a Corviknight, and then maybe the team also has like a Hatterene or maybe it also has a Clefable, right? Maybe you're just thinking, okay, Garchomp just isn't going to do very much in this matchup no matter how I tech it. That's okay too, because Garchomp can still contribute to the game by setting up something like Stealth Rock, Spikes. It could act as a physical wall to any of your opponent's threats and punish any contact moves with Rocky Helmet and Rough Skin. The point is that Garchomp is versatile because it has movesets that are meaningfully different enough that they require different answers. And it's always going to be able to contribute in any given matchup that you face. Whereas Chi-Yu might not be able to do very much if you go up against a Primarina, if you go up against a Tyranitar, an Azumarill, a Keldeo. Your usefulness is much less is going to be much lower depending on your matchup because it does not have the tools to adapt. So versatility is just the number one important thing that you need to consider when you are looking at what kind of Pokemon to draft. Now, there are different ways that a Pokemon can be versatile, and this isn't super important, but it's a side tangent I'm willing to explore. The examples that I used for the most part were offensive versatility. Now, that is for the most part what you want to care about, because again, something like Garchomp, the Corviknight can switch into the Destroy Dance, but it gets lose to the Fire Blast set. You get the idea. That's offensive versatility. Different movesets force different answers. There's also something you can argue is called defensive versatility, and a good example of this is Clefable. Now, Clefable is very unique. I'd say Clefable kind of gets too much hate for how expensive it often is in a draft setting, but it's good. It's really good because of its two really good abilities called Magic Guard and Unaware. Magic Guard is going to be an ability that negates all chip damage, so Clefable doesn't care about sand, about toxic, about hazards. None of that really matters. It's not going to take any of that kind of chip damage. And the other ability, Unaware, is really useful because it can ignore the Pokemon's opponent's stat changes, like when they set up a Calm Mind or a Swords Dance, Dragon Dance. Unaware is going to ignore those boosts in damage, and you can use that to just let Clefable sit in front of a threat that has boosted up and not care, and you can just chip it down with Moonblast to any coverage, what have you. These two abilities necessitate different approaches to breaking through Clefable. A Magic Guard Clefable, now that's something that you would click Swords Dance or Nasty Plot against and just bust through its defenses. It's not like the stats are pretty good, but it's not that good. You can break through Clefable if you want to with any reasonable Swords Dance, Nasty Plot, whatever attacker. That's not hard. That's too hard. On the other hand, Unaware Clefable, that kind of response isn't going to work, and you're better off trying to click Toxic or Leech Seed or Wear Down Unaware Clefable with hazards. So because of these two different abilities, Clefable forces a different approach when you're trying to break through it, and that is a concept I would term defensive versatility. Not too useful, but it does exist. Versatility is not just about offensive and forcing different movesets. You can also think about it defensively. So that's versatility, and that's the number one most important thing. I would say the second most important thing would be your speed tiers. Now, speed is the one stat in Pokemon that is very, very, very important to have precisely correct. If you take a look at something like Glimmora at 86 base speed and you compare that to something like Great Tusk at 87, both of these things can potentially like to run max speed. So let's just put it that. Now, Glimmora at max speed hits 298. Great Tusk at max speed hits 300. Speed is the only stat in which a difference of 1 point is all it takes to swing the matchup, whereas an extra point of HP or an extra point of attack or defense is only going to give you a marginal benefit, Granted, that benefit is always going to be there, so that's has its own charm, I guess. But a 1 point of attack or 1 point of defense is only going to give you that extra 1 point. It's not going to make that much of a big difference. But a 1 point of speed is all it takes to make the difference between who moves fast, who moves first, and who moves second. And so it is very, very important that you precisely adjust your speed tiers according to your opponent each week. So you can maximize the efficiency with your EV spreads. So for example, if my opponent had a Glamora at 86 speed, I don't need 300 speed on this Great Tusk. I actually only need 299. And that little bit, that one speed, I'm not going to do this when I am, say, loading up a game in OU. I'm expecting to fight other Great Tusk that are also going to be at max speed. I don't want to lose out on speed ties potentially versus those Great Tusks on ladder, so I'm not going to run 248 speed on ladder. But when it comes to draft, you know exactly what you're fighting, and so while simultaneously it is important to have at least one more point of speed than the next slowest Pokemon, it is also not important to have any more speed than that. Because if I had more speed, 300, that's just 4 EVs I'm wasting. I could put that somewhere else. This is obviously a drastic example, so let's take a look at something like Iron Crown instead. That's relatively, it's a lot faster than Glamora. So let's say that I still want to outspeed Glamora with Iron Crown because Glamora has Earth power. I don't want to be taking 2 of those. Can I afford to outspeed it without going timid? That's your first question. Because if you can afford to go modest and still outspeed Glamora, that's a lot more special attack that you're getting. But I can't. I cannot hit 299 with only modest nature, so I need to go timid. Then, with 324 speed, that's still a lot more, so we can take us all the way down to 299. Let's go max special attack, and boom. 96 EVs in HP that you get that are extra. You get that extra bulk, and you're still outspeeding Glamora. So if the next slowest or fastest Pokemon that you're fighting is a Glamora on your opponent's team, then by being specific about your speed, you have saved 96 HP EVs that you can put into HP. No, 96 EVs you can put anywhere, frankly, but they're often going to go into HP. But these are HP EVs that you have sort of saved, sort of generated out of thin air because you are not lazy and you're not just going max. This is draft. You have to be specific. You have to be tailoring your team to your opponents to fight your opponent's team. And so it's very important for you to have good speed tiers so that you can adjust your speed to your opponent. And well, all I've really done is explain the concept of speed creeping your Pokemon to be faster than your opponents. That doesn't actually yet capture the heart of speed tiers. And for that, I will actually explain that concept later in the video where I show you some example drafts. I think I've already clicked through them in the tabs, but speed tiers is more complicated than that, but we'll get to that. That's one thing to explain. Now, I think another important thing about draft is you need to know your tier list, and you need to know your rules, and you need to know your little quirks of the draft. So for example, when you look at this tier list, you're noticing the Pokemon that are in the 16-point column, but you're also noticing this little number 23 with a little Terra Crystal sign next to it. What that means is that you can draft something like Enamorus for 16 points, but if you want to make Enamorus your Terra Captain, then it's going to cost you 23 points. And so the number of points that you have in each draft, your budget, so to speak, is going to be how many points you can spend on buying Pokemon. And this is going to vary based on whatever rules you're working with. I can't tell you what rules you're working with because there are as many different settings and drafts and little quirks as there are communities that are willing to play. So you need to know your rules and know your budget. So you have to take that into account when you're deciding who to draft, because the better Pokemon are going to be more expensive. That is how every draft works. Something like Dragapult, extremely fast, great attack, decent special attack, very versatile, very fast. It's always going to be expensive. You look at the other end of the spectrum, something like Avalugg, slow, ice typing, pretty not that great. It's never going to be that expensive. 4 points. And you can see the 1 point category is, completely unusable stuff, relatively speaking. So you need to look, you're never going to have a super huge budget that allows you to buy like 6 Pokemon in this category and just run a full team of like broken threats every week. That is never going to be the case. You need to look for what kind of good Pokemon you want to draft that are expensive, and then you need to start looking towards what's cheaper, and then start looking towards what's even cheaper. And you have to wonder, where do I spend my points? It's all like, for example, with this rule set, we have 100 points, and we cannot spend more than 25 points of those 100 on a Terra Captain. So, for example, if I wanted to draft a Terra Captain Enamorus, that's going to cost 23. So I only have 77 points left to draft a bunch of other Pokemon. But if I want another Terra Captain, it cannot be worth more than 2 points. That's a pretty confusing rule set. Not always going to be the case, but that's how it worked here. And so we have a minimum of 10 Pokemon that we need to draft and a budget of 100 points. And I think what's most important when you're considering what to buy and what to spend a lot of points on and what not to spend so many points on is, I think, considering your utility, your offense, your speed control, and your overall defensive profile. I think it is important to spend a lot of points on your speed control and your offense, because what you can do cheaply, you should do cheaply in a draft setting, because the budgets are often tight. But I think that offense and speed control are very hard to cheap out on. And to demonstrate this, I want to adjust or filter these Pokemon by speed. And let's take a look at what kind of Pokemon are cheap. Let's take a look at what kind of fast Pokemon are cheap, and let's see how effective they would be at speed control. Electrode. It's fast. It's definitely fast. However, it has 80 special attack. What coverage does it have? Foul play? Explosion? Aside from electric moves, if you're not making Electrode a Terra Captain, there's not much you can really do. You're not actually like revenge killing stuff with an Electrode. Again, what are you going to do with the Sceptile? Like, sure, it has Unburden, but how strong is Sceptile? 105? Okay. But then what kind of coverage does it have? Earthquake is cool, but that's using its weaker attack stat. Focus Blast is cool, but that's unreliable and inaccurate. Like, what can you really do with a Sceptile? It's 120 speed, but if being fast only matters insofar as you can actually do something with your speed and that you can actually like threaten things, and that doesn't necessarily mean outspeeding and killing them. Maybe you can Thunderwave them, or you can a fast Encore is always valuable, but it's really difficult to get. I find it's difficult to get a good value out of fast Pokemon when they are cheap. They tend not to be that good, and if they are good, they're probably more expensive. So if you look at the more expensive options, like I said, take a look at Darkrai. 18 points. We're running out of space here. Let's whoop. Whoop. Okay. Darkrai. We got 135 special attack, 125 speed. You got fantastic coverage, ice, fighting, electric, poison, sludge bomb, whatever you need. This Darkrai has it. And if you can't do something about what you're in front of, you could Thunder Wave it. You can Wisp it. Maybe you could trick it a Choice Scarf. Maybe you're slowing it down with a Taunt. There are a lot of things, a lot of options that Darkrai has in order to contribute to speed control. And again, let's take a look at something like Iron Bundle. Iron Bundle is incredibly fast. It has a, what is it, 136? Yeah, good lord, this thing is so fast, right? It has basically unresisted coverage with Hydro Pump and Freeze Dry. There's damn near nothing that can really resist both of those attacks, right? It's got a respectable special attack stat at 124. It can boost either of those stats with a booster energy. And you have options like a fast Encore or a fast Flip Turn that can take advantage of any sort of non-attacking move. These are all really great options that Iron Bundle has access to, and it can actually do something with its speed. It's fast, but it can do something with that speed. And so it's really important to not cheap out on having a fast Pokemon as one of your 2 or 3 more expensive pickups. Likewise, it's also really important for your offense to put some money in there. What I mean by offense is not necessarily just a straight wall breaker like Landorus or Chi-Yu here in the 19-point category, really strong Pokemon, but that it doesn't need to be that. Offense, I more so mean a fast sweeper. And what do I mean by the term sweeper? What I mean is a Pokemon that can use a turn, or sometimes doesn't even need a turn. It can set up, boost its special attack or attack along with its speed, or be naturally fast enough, or increase its speed through a variety of other ways. Basically, boosting your stats to the point that you can just attack and kill every other Pokemon that is remaining on your opponent's team. Obviously, your opponent is going to be aware of that. They're going to be, prepared for that. But still, having the pressure of a sweeper can make preparation for your opponent a lot more difficult. And ultimately, that's what putting together a good draft is all about. Making sure that your opponent has a miserable time prepping for you with all your options and all your threats. So let's take a look at what I mean by a fast sweeper. You can obviously think of something like a Dragon Dance, right? It's a very straightforward way to boost your attack and speed. Something like a Gouging Fire, that's a sweeper. Dragon Dance boosts its attack by 1 stage, boosts its speed by 1 stage, and then if you can't stop it, you better have a way to quickly shut that down, or maybe you can Morning Sun and get another Dragon Dance. Or maybe one is enough, and you have nothing else that can outspeed it, you have nothing else that can take a hit from it, and you lose, you get swept. But Dragon Dance is not the only way to have a fast sweep. There are other options like Volcarona. Volcarona has Quiver Dance, an exceptionally good move that can boost your special attack speed and special defense. And there's a reason that Volcarona is not eligible to be a Terra Captain, because a Terra Volcarona is a terrifying threat that the tournament organizers have correctly identified as far too powerful to be eligible for having a Terra Captain. And that's just another option for a fast sweeper. Another way to think about it is just having booster speed. Booster energy, for those of you that don't know, is an item that interacts with the abilities Quark Drive and Photosynthesis. We can look at something like Great Tusk. Yeah, that's a decent Photosynthesis user. So booster energy, as it says right there, if the Sunny Day active or booster energy used, the highest stat is multiplied by 1.3 or 1.5 if it's speed. So in the case of something like Great Tusk, if I were to use a booster energy on this Pokemon and make sure that its speed stat is the highest stat that it has, right? Great Tusk is customizable in this way because its attack stat, although the base attack stat is very high, you can tailor it in such a way that it's still one lower than the speed, so Booster Energy Tusk in this case will get a speed boost. If I were to do this little tweak, then Booster Energy would be boosting attack instead, but because it is lower, it boosts speed. And if it has a 1.5 speed boost, you could do something like bulk up, and there you go. You've boosted your speed, you've boosted your attack and defense, you're ready to sweep. Well, you might be. That's one way to boost your speed and threaten a sweep. Rapid Spin is also another way, coincidentally. Great Tusk can also do this. Rapid Spin is a great move, I'll explain for other reasons, but Rapid Spin also boosts your speed by one stage. So again, that's a one way to sweep too. Another Rapid Spinner that could be great at sweeping is potentially Terapagos. Because this Pokemon has both Calm Mind and Rapid Spin, that is one way that it can get a boost to its special attack and spit up stat, increase its speed. Boom, that's a sweeper. That's a fast sweeper. That's scary. Now, that Rapid Spin and Booster Energy are there too, but that's not the only way. Like I showed you earlier, Garchomp has this really cool move called Scale Shot. It's not just Garchomp that has it, but Garchomp is probably the best user of it that's on the board. Garchomp doesn't get Dragon Dance. Garchomp gets Swords Dance and Scale Shot. Come on now. Oh, Sale. Scale Shot. Now, Scale Shot is a multi-hit move that can miss 2 to 5 times, and the user drops its defense by one stage and increases its speed by one stage each time it uses Scale Shot. So if you use Scale Shot once, -1 defense, +1 speed. Scale Shot twice, -2 defense, +2 speed. That can be synergized really well with Swords Dance that increases your attack by 2 stages. And so if you Swords Dance and then you kill something with Scale Shot, boom, you're in business. That's a fast sweep. There's Scale Shot. Oh yes, Unburden is another way to boost your speed. Let's see, where is Sneasler? This little bastard. Oh. 18 points. That makes sense. Actually, I think that's overvalued. But Sneasler, that is a very dangerous sweeper, fast sweeper, because of its ability Unburden. What Unburden does is it doubles the Pokemon's speed when its held item is used. So, and that boost only works once. The boost is lost if it switches. So a common strategy, let's say you have drafted something like electric terrain, grassy terrain. Let's say that you drafted a Rillaboom. And Rillaboom has this really cool ability called Grassy Surge, which summons grassy terrain on switching. And then you pair that with something like a Grassy Seed Sneasler. When the terrain is grassy terrain, the seed is consumed and your defense goes up by one stage. But by using your item, you activate Unburden, which doubles your speed. You also have access to Swords Dance, which doubles your attack stat, and with a massive 130 attack, 120 speed, with potentially with one free turn, you're getting a +2 from Swords Dance, doubling your speed with Unburden, and getting a +1 defense from Grassy Seed. This is a massive threat. This is a fast sweeper that's super dangerous. So that is another way you can boost your speed. But I want you to think even further beyond just Dragon Dance. We're going to also look at priority. A great way to look at priority is by looking at something like Raging Bolt. There's also King Gambit here, isn't there? Yeah, King Gambit's a pretty good one too. Let's take a look at King Gambit. So, King Gambit and Raging Bolt are probably the two most threatening ones because they have very strong priority moves. In Sucker Punch and Swords Dance, in King Gambit's case, in Raging Bolt's case, you can look at Calm Mind and Thunderclap. Now, these are very slow Pokemon, so how are they fast sweepers? Thunderclap and Sucker Punch are moves that go first. They have an increased stage of priority. And so these priority moves, like you're often thinking of moves like Quick Attack or Aqua Jet. These moves are usually not that strong. But in the case of King Gambit and Raging Bolt, these Pokemon are naturally absurdly strong to begin with. Raging Bolt can have a booster energy, boosting its already super high special attack along with Calm Mind. King Gambit can have Sword Stance, double its massive attack stat along with Defiant or Supreme Overlord. You pair this with moves that go first in the priority bracket, like Sucker Punch or Thunderclap, and then that can also function as a fast sweeper. These moves are much less reliable than having that raw increased speed stat, however, because moves like Sucker Punch and Thunderclap, they only work when your opponent has clicked an attack move. If they click something that's not an attack move, like maybe they set hazards with Stealth Rock, maybe they healed with Soft Boiled, or maybe they click Taunt or Encore, then the priority attack is not going to activate and your fast sweep will not get pulled off. So there are ways to work around this and punish this, but it is far less reliable than a straightforward fast sweep. However, it is still something that you have to respect. And so it is worth mentioning that this is one way that you can get a fast sweep going. Priority is one way, and another way that is a lot more specific specifically to Quaquaval. Quaquaval has this really interesting move called Aqua Step that is not only 80 base power, 100 accuracy, so it's just like a very respectable water physical attack, but it always raises the user's speed by once. So just by attacking, you are increasing your speed. And because Quaquaval also gets the ability Moxie, which means that its attack goes up by one stage if its attacks kills a Pokemon, basically what this combination creates is that if Quaquaval kills a Pokemon with Aqua Step, it is getting both +1 attack and +1 speed. It's doing it for free, meaning that you didn't necessarily give Quaquaval a free turn to do whatever it wants, but as long as it's in the right position to threaten killing something with Aqua Step, you're potentially giving it a free Dragon Dance, which is very scary. There are other moves that are similar to Aqua Step, such as Trailblaze and Flame Charge. These are 50 base power attacks, however, and they are much, much weaker than the reliable Aqua Step at 80 power. So those are technically options that you can use to boost your speed, but those are much more niche, and they're a lot weaker attacks, so it's just harder to use those. So I mentioned those like as a sort of asterisk. And another couple of asterisks we can mention are using something like a Salackberry. Now, Salackberry is an item, let's use Heracross as an example, good old Heracross. Salackberry is an item that boosts your speed by one stage when your health is at 1/4 of your max HP or less. So in a case like this, it's very important with Salackberry, if you're using Substitute, you want to make sure that 3 substitutes brings you down to exactly 25% HP so that activates your Salackberry. Or if you want to be left at 1 HP after using 4 substitutes, then you want to make sure that your HP is a number that's divisible by 4 and then +1. So for example, at the current 301 HP, Heracross has 4 substitutes that are each worth 75 HP. You use those 4, you get left down to 1 HP. But if you don't want to be left at 1 HP and you want to be at 25 after 3 subs instead, then you adjust your HP stat to something like 304 so that you have 4 substitutes that are worth 76 health each. What's the difference? Well, let's say that you want to be left at 1 HP. Maybe sub isn't really the best way to do that. You could use Endure, but let's say that you wanted to use Substitute for some reason. Being brought down to 1 HP is valuable when you pair it with moves like Reversal that have more power the less HP the user has left. So it's really important that you be able to sub 4 times and get down to 1 HP so your Reversal is online and you activate your Salackberry. On the other hand, if you're not interested in using Reversal and you don't want to be left at 1 HP because you're worried about something like Rocky Helmet or Priority and you think that you can live those things with 25% health, then maybe, let's say you want to use Megahorn in combination with Swarm. Swarm is active at just 1/3 of your max HP. You don't need to get down to 1 HP. So if you want to just be left at 25% health when you get your speed boost, then you adjust your HP, you proc Select-Berry at 25% health, you start Mega Horning with the Swarm boost. That works too. There you go. So both Endure Select-Berry and Substitute Select-Berry are options that you can use to boost your speed. And let's see. Oh, there's one. Yes. Something like Armor Rouge and Ceruledge. But let's just take a look at Armor Rouge here. Weak Armor is the ability that can boost your speed by 2 stage and lower your defense by 1 when a physical attack hits the Pokemon. So you can set this up in such a way that maybe you have weakness policy, and maybe you have weak armor, and maybe you have endure. And you can set this up in such a way that you are sitting your Armor Rouge in front of a physical attacker that can hit it super effectively. You endure, you take that super effective hit, and then you activate your weakness policy, you activate weak armor. That's +2 attack, +2 special attack, +2 speed, -1 defense in 1 turn. And then from there, you have access to something like Stored Power, which is going to be very strong. It's going to be, what is it? +40, 80, 120. Yeah, it's going to be +1. It's a 140 base power move after weakness policy and weak armor proc. That's quite strong. So that is yet another way to be a fast sweeper. And oh, there's one more thing. That's right. This is I'm just like exploring every potential option for you to think about fast sweeping. The final option I'll cover is something like Trick Room, where a Pokemon sets the Trick Room for itself and then starts sweeping from there. So something like Reuniclus, it can have that natural power with Life Orb and ignore the drawback of Life Orb with the move like with an ability like Magic Guard that makes sure it just ignores all passive damage. You set up a Trick Room to take advantage of your super low speed so that you move fast, because you move in Trick Room, the slower Pokemon moves first, and then you just let it rip with something like Psychic, Focus Blast, and Shadow Ball. So this is also a Pokemon that can potentially set Trick Room and do a fast sweep. Now, in this case, it's not exactly boosting its special attack, and because Trick Room is limited, you only have 4 turns in singles after you set the Trick Room to actually use your quote-unquote increased speed. This is not going to be a sort of like super threatening fast sweeper, but again, this is Magearna is probably not going to be legal in the format you're going to be fighting in, but let's say it is. Magearna has the ability where its special attack raises by 1 stage when another Pokemon faints. That can also set Trick Room. It also has a huge special attack stat, and if it gets a kill under Trick Room, Soul Heart gets a special attack raised by +1. That is a quote-unquote fast sweeper that's going to get out of control. Well, Magearna also has other options like Shift Gear, which can double its speed. So, you know, Magearna is just it's a whole bag of worms. It's a really disgusting Pokemon, but that is just another way to illustrate the method of fast sweeping. And I really place emphasis on fast because the another way to sweep is slow. You can do slow sweeping. A slow, bulky sweeper can just attack and kill the Pokemon on your opponent's team without it dying because it's so bulky. So a great example of this is something like Cresselia. Now, Cresselia is massively bulky. Look at the 100 base 20 HP, 110 defense, 120 speed F. Incredibly bulky. It has access to something like Calm Mind, boosted special attack and special defense. It has access to reliable-ish recovery in something like Moonlight. And then you go with something like Stored Power, which can get much stronger with the Calm Minds it has. And then maybe you have Moonblast for coverage, right? This is a pretty standard set. You know, maybe you go Leftovers, Cobra Cloak, whatever it is. And this is a bulky sweeper. This is honestly a respectable threat. The reason that I don't recommend really going out of your way to draft bulky sweepers is because bulky sweepers are much easier to handle in a draft setting as opposed to a fast sweeper. And the reason that is because when you can move before your opponent, you can do certain things that can disrupt their slow sweep that you cannot do in front of a fast sweeper. And when a Pokemon is able to do that, your slow sweep often gets ruined, and it's a useless at slot attempt. You've wasted your Pokemon, you've wasted your time trying to sweep when it failed. What I mean by that is the specific ways that a slow sweep can fail is with specifically, I think the most important way is with the move Encore. Now let's get into a room or something. The move Encore forces the target to repeat its last move for the next 3 turns. Now when you have a slow Pokemon, well, honestly, Cresselia isn't that slow, but we're not going to be making it. We're not going to increase its speed or make it fast in most cases. You're just going to improve its bulk. So if you're Cresselia, it's going to be clicking Calm Mind a bunch. It's going to be clicking Moonlight a bunch in order to set up and heal in front of whatever is trying to break through it. If the opponent clicks Encore on a turn that you have clicked Calm Mind or Moonblast, you are forced to repeat Calm Mind or forced to repeat Moonlight. And so that is one way that your sweep gets stopped, because when you have the Encore forcing you to Calm Mind, your opponent gets free turns to attack, to chip you down, to phase you out, so on and so forth. It's really hard to work around that. Another thing I just alluded to was being phased out. There are a bunch of options that your opponent has to do that. There are moves like Dragon Tail, Roar, and Whirlwind. And what I mean by phase out is being forced to switch out. So so look at Roar. It forces the target to switch to a random ally. Actually, why am I even looking it up here? I can just... Smeargle learns everything here. Roar. Yeah, forces the target to switch to a random ally. And lobby is distracting. When you do this, if a Pokemon, like if you're trying to set Cresselia up on something like maybe an Incineroar, right? Incineroar can learn Roar. It's in the name. It says it right there. Cresselia is not going to be able to set up a bunch of Calm Minds in front of Incineroar, because Incineroar can just click Roar, and then Cresselia's sweep has failed. That is another way that slow sweeps can fail to get off the ground. Whereas a fast sweep, something like a Dragon Dance or like a Swords Dance, Scale Shot, Garchomp, if I just switched in Incineroar there, I just die to a +2 Earthquake. All right, I don't have the chance to click Roar and deny that sweep. It's obviously there are other ways to other Pokemon that can phase out, and the specific fast sweeper that you're going up against might have a different matchup against the Pokemon that you have that could potentially click Roar or Whirlwind to deny setup. So that I'm not going to just say blankets in a blanket statement that fast sweepers always can ignore or break through a Pokemon that tries to phase it. That's not necessarily true, but a offensive fast sweeper is much more likely to pressure or kill the Pokemon that is trying to phase it out much more successfully than the slow sweeper is, because the slow sweeper, the most important flaw of a slow sweeper is that it lacks immediate power. When you have something like Cresselia with a base 75 special attack, the Moonblast isn't stabbed, the store power takes time to get going. This is not a Pokemon that can just click Calm Mind once and start getting kills. It is a Pokemon that needs multiple Calm Minds. It needs to click Moonlight a bunch of times in the process in order to become a threat. And if you didn't know Cresselia was coming, then Cresselia might be a legitimate threat to you in something like the OU ladder. But because you know Cresselia is coming, you have many more ways to prepare for Cresselia, and you are much less likely to give it the number of free turns that it needs to get going. Because Cresselia wants like 2 or 3 Calm Minds before it can really start clicking attacks and start doing damage. Whereas something like a Gouging Fire or a Garchomp, it really only needs one turn to click Swords Dance, or one turn to click Dragon Dance, one turn to click Quiver Dance, and then get out of control. That's why fast sweepers are so much more threatening in a draft setting than bulky sweepers. And again, I haven't even finished getting through the different ways that bulky sweepers can get foiled. If you trick something like a Choice Scarf, like Smeargle can learn Trick, and if you let it hold the Choice Scarf, choice items force the holder to select the first move it clicks. So if I outspeed Cresselia with a Choice Scarf and then trick it, and Cresselia clicks Calm Mind after it has received the Choice Scarf, then Cresselia is locked into Calm Mind. It cannot switch moves to click Stored Power or Moonblast, and so you have just foiled the sweep attempt then. Now a Cresselia that's holding Choice Scarf is useless. So that is another way it can get foiled. And in general, because Cresselia is slower, you might just fall to repeated attacks from faster Pokemon. Like, let's say you're fighting two dark types in a row. One of them crunches, you kill one with the Moonblast, and then the second one is faster and crunches and then kills you. So your bulk only holds out so long in a draft setting when your opponent is prepared to break through you. And the offensive pressure that you might go up against is probably going to be hard for you to manage. So just a lot more obstacles that slow sweepers are going to face, and in general, it's not worth it to try and draft around a really strong slow sweeper, because your opponent knows it's coming, and they're going to have a lot of tools, such as the Roar Whirlwind, the Trick Choice Scarf, the Encore, even Taunt. How could I forget Taunt? If Smeargle, Smeargle, anything can taunt in front of Cresselia and just prevent it from clicking Calm Mind or Moonlight. Now, this is also true of fast sweepers, but because fast sweepers tend to be naturally, fast, the Pokemon that is clicking Taunt cannot necessarily outspeed them to deny the setup in the first place, right? Because if I have something like, again, good old Garchomp at 102 speed, it's a lot more difficult to outspeed Garchomp and taunt it and prevent it from Swords Dancing, as opposed to a Cresselia at just 85. It's a lot easier to taunt Cresselia and outspeed it and prevent it from setting up. And so you also have more time to taunt Cresselia, because, again, Cresselia needs 2 or 3 Calm Minds to really get going and be a threat. If you come in on Cresselia and taunt it after just 1 Calm Mind, it's a lot easier to handle, as opposed to switching in on Garchomp and taunting it after 1 Swords Dance. Well, 1 Swords Dance is usually all Garchomp needs. It's ready to Scale Shot and an Earthquake and then rip through your team after that. So, taunt. All the ways. Taunt, Roar, Trick, Encore. These are all really difficult obstacles for slow sweepers to get through, and it usually makes it so that it's not worth it. At the very least, I don't recommend focusing on slow sweepers as your main offense. So that was a big old rant, sort of getting into the nitty-gritty of the differences between fast sweepers and slow sweepers. But it's important to understand the specific reasons why slow sweepers are often less successful, why you shouldn't bother with them, and why you should focus on getting some kind of fast sweeper instead. So I think it's also important to compare and contrast the differences in expensive fast sweepers versus cheaper fast sweepers. And whatever is expensive is always going to be better than what's cheap in a draft setting, but it's fast sweepers, the quality of expensive fast sweepers is a lot higher than the quality of cheap fast sweepers. And I want to demonstrate that with something like, let's compare something like Dragonite. We can even compare something like Salamence. Ooh, but there's also big backs. Big backs caliber. Whatever. We'll settle with DD Salamence, okay? This thing, kind of a threat. Two great abilities. Intimidate can help it set up a Dragon Dance. Moxie can help it snowball even harder out of control. Really good stuff. Dragonite. No, this is Salamence. Dragonite's cool too. It has multi-scale. But let's focus on Salamence. Alright, focus. Where is Salamence on the board here? What? Where is it? Ah, geez, I have to search. Been defeated. Oh, it's in the 13 points. Okay. 13 points. I'm so blind. Alright. Salamence. I think Salamence is a pretty good sweeper as far as this draft board is concerned. But if you want to make it potentially one of the strongest sweepers on the entire tier list, you make Salamence a Terra Captain right here with that 22 points, okay? That's a big part here. That's a big chunk of your budget. It's over 150 your budget just spent on one Pokemon when you have 9 more Pokemon to draft. But I think this is worth it when you compare it to something like legitimately, what can you even compare this to? Like, what are your options here? Like, bro, Altaria? Yeah, well, okay. Not a fair comparison, but like, it illustrates the point, right? Let's compare Altaria and let's compare Salamence. Okay, this is very mean, but we gotta do it. Okay, we gotta do it. Altaria. It has Dragon Dance. It has... That actually gets acrobatics. That's pretty cool. It has Dragon Dance, but it's looking at 70 base attack and 80 base speed. Natural Cure is a cool ability, but it's not actually that helpful with a sweeping set like Dragon Dance, because if you get wisped and while trying to set up, then switching out is it might cure the burn, but it's not going to help you sweep. It'll only open an opportunity for you later down the line, but that opportunity might not necessarily come. On the other hand, you have something like Salamence with 135 base attack and 100 base speed, and it has the abilities with Intimidate and Moxie to get snowballed out of control. This is going to be a far more successful sweeper most of the time, well, basically all the time, more so than Altaria, because it has much more attack, much more speed, a better ability with Moxie, and it's just like, you can't really compare these two things. Altaria is just not going to get the job done the same way. What are some other comparisons we can draw? Ooh, yeah. Can Masquerain learn Quiver Dance? Ooh. Can you get... Oh, you can. There we go. Quiver Dance. Yeah. Let's compare that to a better Quiver Dancer like Volcarona. Now, again, Masquerain, special attack of 100, speed of 80. Volcarona, special attack of 135, speed of 100. These stats make a big difference because when it comes to being a fast sweeper, your success lies in your ability to one-hit KO things after you have set up. It's not enough. It's just not good enough to not one-hit KO. Because if you can't one-hit KO, the chances are high that you are going to take too much damage in the process trying to get through a wall, or you can just get crippled with something like Thunderwave, you can get forced out with hazards, so on and so forth. Oh my god. I didn't even mention Toxic when it came to stopping slow sweepers. You get the idea. It's because Toxic can rack up poison damage, and a slow sweeper can't out-heal Toxic at some point. So that is another way you can stop slow sweepers that doesn't necessarily work with fast ones. Okay, Toxic, yeah. So that is... Oh my god, I just derailed. Right, Toxic. Toxic is not going to slow down fast sweepers as much because Toxic takes like 5 or 6 turns to actually kill something. if it's not clicking healing moves in between. And 5 or 6 turns is all a fast sweeper might need to just clean up your whole team. So toxic, they don't care. Fast sweepers. The differences, that's right, the differences in the stats here are going to be like night and day, and these are important differences because with the higher speed, again, we talked about how important speed was. Being just 1 point faster is all you need in order to be faster and outspeed your opponent. Having the special attack necessary to one-hit KO them is necessary to keep a fast sweep going. So something like Masquerain, Quiver Dance, it's just not going to be as successful as something like Volcarona. Sorry, need some water real quick. So, I believe I have hammered in the importance of of a fast sweeper. Now, that is where, right, that coming back to the greater point, that is where you spend your budget. Speed. Speed and fast sweepers. Okay. We have, I think, sufficiently covered speed and fast sweepers and their importance. That's where you want to spend your points. Spend. Is that supposed to be an upward arrow? Can you tell? Okay, cool. Let's look at the third. The third most important thing? I don't know if it's really third most important. We're just going down the list, okay? Utility. Boom, boom, bang. Utility. That is another one of those buzzwords. Utility sounds nice, but what does utility actually mean? What are the things that you actually concretely should be looking for when you are drafting? What I mean by utility is largely the ability to set entry hazards and remove them, as well as do things like, status, click status moves like Will-O-Wisp, Thunderwave. That could be useful. Having options like Roar, Whirlwind, that could be useful. And potentially having stuff like, actually, what else am I even thinking of? Oh, pivoting moves, yeah. I think moves like U-turn, Volt Switch, Flip Turn, Baton Pass, if that's legal in your draft, Baton Pass, I'm about to go into a side tangent. I'll keep it short. Baton Pass, in my opinion, should be legal in drafts as long as you don't pass any stats and you don't pass any subs. I think it's totally reasonable to have that kind of restriction, and that sort of opens up a lot of Pokemon to be good pivots. Okay, see, kept it short. End of rant. Those are all good things that to look for on a team, but it's very important to not spend too much points on utility. And again, let's use some examples. I think the most expensive and therefore, the best utility Pokemon on this tier list that you're looking at right now is Great Tusk. Why is that? Well, Great Tusk is a pretty great guy because it has a massive attack stat, a respectable speed stat, and it has a ton of great coverage. The ground fighting stabs, it's an okay typing, but what really rounds it out is not just high base power moves for its stabs like Close Combat and Headlong Rush, but it also has excellent coverage like Ice Spinner, Knockoff. I don't know if Mega Horn and Play Rough are terribly useful, but those exist. And it even has something like Supercell Slam and Stone Edge, and even Temper Flare. Basically, Great Tusk has a bunch of coverage moves, and it's going to be contributing to pretty much any matchup just by clicking attacks with its big attack stat. So it's a good Pokemon. That's the most important thing a utility Pokemon can be. It's great if you can click Rapid Spin and Stealth Rock and stuff, but if you're not actually contributing to the game, then it's also hard to like be good at utility. And the utility that Great Tusk can provide is hazard removal in Rapid Spin and setting Stealth Rock in Stealth Rock. I should have said setting hazards in Stealth Rock. You get the idea. Now, these moves are crucially not attacks. Well, Rapid Spin is an attack, but it's not a very strong attack. These are moves that you kind of need to find room to click, because these aren't exactly like attacks. You need to find a free turn in order to click Rapid Spin and click Stealth Rock, or you're going to, if you click these moves in a bad position, you risk losing a lot of health on your Pokemon, or you risk them getting crippled, or, so on and so forth. Ultimately, you need to create good positioning to find opportunities to click these utility moves. And your ability to do that is going to depend on the Pokemon clicking those utility moves. Something like Great Tusk, it has an enormous defense stat. If I park myself in front of a Bisharp, not only is Bisharp not going to do too much to me, it's also really scared by my close combat, and it's probably going to switch out. And Bisharp switching out gives me a turn to click Rapid Spin or click Stealth Rock. That's the concrete example of a great Pokemon creating openings to perform its job. So Great Tusk, great at utility. What's the problem? The problem is that it is worth 19 points. That is incredibly expensive. And I don't recommend spending this many points on your utility Pokemon. Now, what's a better example? I think we're going to compare this to something like Donphan. Donphan is not as good as Great Tusk. We can look side by side comparison with these stats. I mean, Donphan is just way slower. But Donphan is not a bad Pokemon either. It has the ability Sturdy, which I think is really cool. You can combine that with heavy duty boots to pretty much always live any one hit. That's cool. Donphan doesn't have a stab fighting move like Great Tusk can, but it still has access to Earthquake. It still has Ice Spinner. It still has Knockoff. I guess there's Play Rough. It still has Stone Edge. It still has coverage. It still has things it can do. And it can still Rapid Spin. And it can still Stealth Rock. So, Donphan, it's a considerable downgrade from Great Tusk. And so, because it has less stats, it is not as able to generate those free turns in order to do its job as utility. However, what's so great about Donphan when compared to Great Tusk? It's only worth 10 points. Where's I'm looking at speed again. Damn it. Checking the name. There we go. See, Donphan, 10 points. One thing I don't think I've stressed enough, but I will later, is that every single point of your budget matters, and it matters a ton. Saving 9 points on your utility Pokemon is a big deal, because that means you can spend those points elsewhere. Because guess what? The shitters in the 1 point category, you don't want to draft these guys. They suck. Any shitter in the 2 point category, you're going to be hard pressed to get any value out of these guys. You really don't want to be in a place with your budget that you need to draft several 1 or 2 pointers just to hit the minimum Pokemon limit when your budget is running on fumes. Because every 1 or 2 pointer that you draft is a Pokemon slot that your opponent can effectively ignore. And the more Pokemon that your opponent can ignore, the easier it is for them to prepare for you. And you don't want that. You want your opponent to suffer preparing for you. You want them to agonize over what Pokemon you'll bring and what movesets will be on which Pokemon and what items and all the possibilities. You just want that to overwhelm them, okay? Am I going to be overwhelmed by Apom, one pointer, little guy? Am I really worried? No. Am I going to be overwhelmed by 2-pointer Ariados? Oh no, what's it going to do? It can set Sticky Web and that's it. That is not a threat. So you really do not want to draft things in the bottom category, usually. And so any point that you can save means that you can draft a more viable Pokemon and a something more respectable threat that your opponent actually has to prepare for. So it's really important that you save points where you can, which is why it's important that you draft Donphan instead of Great Tusk, in my opinion. But let's take this to the extreme. Why shouldn't I draft something like Sandslash? Where's Sandslash? Well, let's just double check how expensive this guy is. 3 points. There we go. Sandslash in the 3-pointer category. Boop, 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 boop. Oh, bah. There we go. Okay, Sandslash. And then let's take a good look at Sandslash. Now, notice how all of these Pokemon are all ground types. They can all set Stealth Rock, and they can all Rapid Spin. This is a comparison that is used to illustrate a point. Great Tusk is worth 19, Donphan is worth 10, and Sandslash is worth 3 points. But let's take a look at their stats side by side. You can see that these stats are getting a little more dire. Donphan had a healthy 90 HP, 120 defense, 120 attack. That was pretty good. Sandslash, we've lost the sauce a little bit, you know? Sandslash also, it doesn't have access to any ice coverage. It gets... I'm actually a little surprised it gets knockoff. That's pretty cool. But it gets knockoff, it gets Earthquake, and you get your Stone Edge, and that's kind of it. Like, as far as attacks go, there's some other... Oh, I guess Super Fang. That's pretty cool. Maybe this wasn't such a good example, but you get the idea. Sandslash, I think, is too cheap. Unless you have drafted Sand, and you can use Sand Rush with Sandslash, which effectively doubles its speed and makes it a much better Pokemon, I think you have gotten to the point where this Pokemon is not usable. And it's really important that your utility Pokemon are affordable, but still expensive enough that they are usable. Because you are going to want Stealth Rock, and you are going to want hazard removal. Well, generally speaking, you are going to want hazards and hazard removal on most teams that you prepare every week, because hazards are really, really good. And so you are probably going to want to invest a team slot to manage your hazards, to remove any that your opponent sets, and to set some up yourself. I'm not saying, in fact, that you should condense both of these jobs onto one Pokemon, but for the sake of the example, let's just say you do. Is Donphan a Pokemon that I would feel good about bringing most weeks? I would say so, yeah. Because it has this sort of unique little thing it can do with Sturdy, and even in a bad matchup, you could do something like Endeavor, and then like Ice Shard, and you can just like take a free dude. Like, it has a respectable attack stat to do some damage with Earthquake, knock off Ice Spinner, or Stone Edge, whatever, right? Donphan can actually do stuff. Sandslash? The attack stat is only 100. It doesn't get any cool abilities unless you have Sand drafted. Like, you have to ask yourself, is Sandslash a Pokemon that I want to bring almost every week? Because I want Stealth Rock and Rapid Spin on almost all of my teams. So am I comfortable bringing Sandslash almost every week? I would say probably not. Obviously, I'm comfortable bringing Great Tusk every week as a Great Tusk, but that's too expensive. If I can get the job done with Rapid Spin and Stealth Rock, Like, no matter how many points you spend here, Rapid Spin and Stealth Rock are Rapid Spin and Stealth Rock, You're not clicking these moves for damage. You're clicking the moves for their effects, their secondary effects, I guess you could say. Even if you spend 19 points on a Rapid Spin and Stealth Rock, you're achieving the same result as spending 3 points on a Rapid Spin and Stealth Rock. The only difference is how comfortable you are actually bringing those Pokemon on your team and how capable they are of generating the free turns required to click these moves. So, am I comfortable bringing Sandslash every week? Probably not. Am I comfortable bringing Donphan every week? Yeah, probably. I could make it work. Am I comfortable bringing Great Tusk every week? Absolutely. But am I comfortable spending 19 points on it? No. 10 points? Fine. 3 points? That's too little. That's the point I want to hammer home here. Utility, here's the ultimate takeaway. Everybody wants utility on their team, but no Pokemon wants to be the one to set it. Your fast sweepers, they love Stealth Rock. They can break the focus sashes on the opponent's team. They can, chip them and bring them into those crucial damage benchmarks to help them OHKO. Entry hazards are great, but nobody wants to be the one to set them. Even Donphan has better things to do, okay? Donphan could use something like, I don't know, Counter. It could use Earthquake, Ice Shard. Even Donphan doesn't want to Stealth Rock. Great Tusk doesn't want to Stealth Rock. Hell, Sandslash doesn't want to Stealth Rock. Nobody wants to click Stealth Rock, but you have to. Someone has to be burdened with the move Stealth Rock so that it can be clicked. So you don't want that burden to fall on your 19-point Pokemon, because your 19-pointer should be out there killing stuff. They should be out there threatening sweeps. They should be doing speed control. Your expensive Pokemon are your superstars, and they should be doing the most. If I'm spending 19 points to do chores, then what are my other guys doing? Am I trying to sweep with someone worth 8 points? Am I doing speed control with someone worth 10 points? Are they going to be that good at their jobs? Because you only have a limited budget. So you cannot spend a ton of points on utility and then also expect to have a ton of points left around for speed control, and also expect a ton for fast sweepers, for dangerous, threatening fast sweepers, and also have a ton for, a good defensive backbone, and so on and so forth. There are only so many points. I recommend the middle approach for utility. Spend some points. Don't spend too much. Don't spend too little. Make sure the utility Pokemon that you draft are good enough that you want to bring them to every game, but not so good that they're breaking your bank. That is my little spiel on utility. What do we want to talk about next? Yeah, let's go with defense. Defense. I think focusing too much on defense is not a good idea. Because if you know defense is coming, then you can work around it. This is all to a limited extent. Basically, what I'm saying is don't try to go overboard with something like stall. Don't try and be the obnoxious guy whose team can't be broken or whatever. I assure you that is not the case. It's not going to work out well against any opponent that knows what they're doing. Probably. That has a good draft. It is much easier to break a defensive team that you know is coming than it is to prepare for offensive threats that you know are coming. But I think that is something that a concept I hope to explain with replay much better than just me yapping, because I think I'm getting into the buzzword territory where I'm just saying things, but I can't really break those down into concepts I can show you. So it's a waste of time to talk about it, in my opinion, in this video. But one valuable thing that defensive Pokemon can do is pivot. What I mean by that, I think I mentioned this before. There are certain moves. Well, Let's rely on good old Smeargle again. U-turn, volt switch, flip turn, baton pass. Are there more that I'm not thinking of? Probably. We'll worry about that later. These moves, these moves are crucially important, in my opinion, to include on every team, because switching out ensures that your more important Pokemon can come in safely. So what I mean by that is, oh, chilly reception, of course. Slowking, I knew you. Oh, and there's teleport too. Yeah. All right, you get the idea. Oh, teleport's not legal. Okay, that's fine. Let's just get chilly reception down here, because that is a very important one to mention. And maybe we'll just /DT teleport so you guys know what it does. User switches out, very important, -6 priority, so that ensures that it is slow. So what you know these moves do is they do damage, and then the user switches out after damaging the target, meaning that you don't just have to spend your turn switching a Pokemon, you can click an attack and switch at the same time. Kind of nifty. There's a massive difference between a fast pivot and a slow pivot. When you have a fast pivot, for the sake of the example, we're already here. So let's say Smeargle is the fast pivot, okay? And let's say I'm fighting a Clefable. Sure. Smeargle is faster than Clefable. So when I click Volt Switch on Clefable, I get to attack, and then I get to switch in something like Slowking. Slowking will take a Moonblast from Clefable just fine, no problem, because it has some pretty good Spadef stat. And there we go. I have repositioned my Smeargle so that it does not take any damage from a Moonblast, and I have switched in a Pokemon that can take a Moonblast better instead. Now, let's say that was a fast pivot. Let's explain the difference between a fast and slow pivot now. The slow pivot, Slowking here, takes the Moonblast from Clefable, I chilly reception out, the user switches out, and I can safely bring in, let's say I want to bring in Darkrai, okay? If I switch Darkrai in directly from Slowking, the switch happens first, which means Darkrai would take a Moonblast from Clefable. That's no bueno. That's why fast pivoting is much less valuable, in my opinion, than slow pivoting, because slow pivoting ensures that the Pokemon that you're bringing in comes in safely, whereas fast pivoting, whatever comes in is probably going to take a hit from whatever you just pivoted on. And it's really important to bring things in safely, because again, your superstars, your 19, your 18, your 20-point superstars, they need to be switching in safely so that they can kill stuff. You don't want to switch, your Dragapult into a Clefable. You want Slowking to chilly reception and then bring in Dragapult on Clefable safely. What you do from that position, it's up to you. In a similar vein, I also want to touch on fast pivoting as a tool for your valuable Pokemon to escape bad situations. And this is kind of a substitute for versatility. So let's take something like Tornadus, because I think this is a great example of a fast pivot. And there's a good reason it's expensive as well in the 19-point category. So, and we can compare something like Tornadus with Chi-Yu too. All right. Let's say that, in fact, we can even, no. Chi-Yu, again, we're struggling against something like Assault Vest Primarina, right? It's walling me, can't do any damage, that sucks. But Chi-Yu, while also not having that much versatility, it also cannot get out of a bad situation with any pivoting move. Whereas something like Tornadus, let's say it's in a bad situation against something like a Jirachi, sure, or no, Thunders. Tornadus T can't really do much to Thundy T, right? Now, that means that Thundy T can switch into Torn pretty safely, knowing that like it's not going to do that much to me. But Torn has the ability to fast U-turn out as Thundy switches in, and it can reposition out of its bad matchups and escape. Chi-Yu doesn't have that luxury, so it's a lot harder for it to navigate its bad matchups, whereas Tornadus can. And so having the ability to U-turn keeps your expensive Pokemon safe. And so I find that it's very valuable for your fast pivots to be able to U-turn. This is why I would rate something like Greninja very highly. Something like Meowscarada, also pretty great. Roaring Moon, also pretty great. And I want to contrast that with something like a Blaziken, because Blaziken's super frail, but it cannot escape its bad matchups. It's sort of just locked in, and if it wants to switch out, then whoever is switching in needs to take an attack. So it's just a lot more clunky. And it's important, in my opinion, to have these kinds of, if you're going for something expensive and you're going for something fast and frail, don't go for your Chi-Yus and your Deoxyses, because they can't escape their bad matchups. Well, Deoxys Speed has less bad matchups, but like its attack stats aren't that high, even though it has a lot of coverage. You get the idea. Iron Valiant is a really good example. I think Iron Valiant is super overrated because it cannot escape its bad matchups very easily. And if you go with something like Booster Energy, well, you've also lost a lot of your value once you switch out. So it's very difficult for it to contribute when if you're fighting a poison type and it can't do much to that poison type, then every time you do something like Moonblast or Knockoff or Close Combat, that poison type is coming in and it's forcing you out, and then your team has to switch into that poison type for free. Whereas if you were fighting something like a Torn T, even if you have a rock or an electric type, you switch it in, Torn T just U-turns out immediately, and your rock and electric type gets no free turns to attack. So fast frail may be okay, but they had better be able to pivot out of their bad matchups, otherwise they're a lot less valuable. That's the great takeaway. And that was just a side tangent on fast pivots. My bad. The the original topic I wanted to harp on was the importance of having slow pivots. So let's take a look at. There's so many. Where do I even begin? Oh my god. Let's begin with like organizing by speed, and then just going to the bottom. Genius. I'm a genius. Slow pivots. Where are my slow pivots? Where are my good slow pivots? Oh, Orthworm has Shed Tail, but that doesn't really count, huh? Where are my good slow pivots? Oh, Belly Bolt. Oh yeah, that's a guy. Yeah, let's talk about Belly Bolt. Belly Bolt, 7 points. Boop, 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 boop. 45 speed. You want that good low speed on your slow pivots. Excelente. It has that Volt Switch. Great. A lot of bulk. 109 HP, 91 speed, 83 speed F. Very, very fat. And just so that it's not super easily like walled by ground types that could block it Volt Switch, but also get some coverage like Ye Olde Muddy Water. Right? There we go. Gets the old Muddy Water to hit the grounds, and then, it's you're on your way. Mono Electric isn't like a great defensive typing because it doesn't have that many resistances, but at the very least it also doesn't have that many weaknesses. So Belly Bolt positioned itself as a pretty great defensive utility piece because of its ability to slow pivot. And again, these are like important things. Like you want to be able to get your Greninja in safely. You don't want Greninja or your Iron Valiant to be switching into attacks because they're not bulky. They're not really supposed to be switching into attacks. They need team support to create free turns for them to get in safely. And the best way to do that is with slow pivots. So you want a couple of slow pivots on your team. And Belly Bolt is one example, but you just want to go through with a good eye for Pokemon that have Volt Switch, U-Turn, Baton Pass, Flip Turn, Chili Reception, Teleport, and you want to find some Pokemon that can synergize well defensively with your team and get your team members in safely. It's otherwise, if you don't have slow pivots, using fast, frail Pokemon like basically glass cannons, it's going to be really hard to position them in effectively without using slow pivots. So it's really important that you have those. And I think it's to a lesser extent, I also want to emphasize things like defensive backbone. You don't want your whole team being weak to like electric or rock, right? You don't want your whole team being weak to a certain type that it's very easy for your opponent to just click and ensure that you can't really do anything about it. And then it's also pretty important for you to not be too focused on one, I guess, like side of the offensive spectrum. So what I mean by that is you don't want to have a team full of like 7, 8 physical attackers. Because then your opponent knows that they can just invest a bunch in defense for all their Pokemon, and they can focus on like spamming Will-O-Wisp, and they're gonna get a lot of value. Whoever they're like go up against, right? That just makes it easy for your opponent to prepare for you if you focus too much on physical attack. Likewise, if you focus too much on special attackers, then it's also easy for your opponent to just slap like 3 or 4 assault vests on their team. They get that plus 1.5 SpDef boost, and they can just grind your team down as you don't do effective damage. So it's important to have a good balance of both physical and special attackers so that your opponent cannot just easily cheese you with those two methods. So I think it's long overdue that we get into some examples. Here is one such example. I think you guys saw it already as I clicked through. This was the team that I drafted for season 2 of Draft Zone Battle League, or Pokemon Draft Zone League, PTBL. Yeah, there we go. And this was a pretty successful draft, I would say. I managed to go undefeated during the regular season, and why this is a draft, I would say, that follows all of the rules, most of the rules that I just set down. And the way it does that is, I think, the most important thing to first demonstrate, and I promise I'll get back to this, speed tiers. Now, these speed tiers, frankly, beautiful stuff, okay? What makes these speed tiers good is that they are well spaced out in a way that it is not easy for my opponents to get a lot of extra EVs left over. Basically, by having my speed tiers spread out like this, it forces my opponents to invest into speed. So, if I had something, if my opponent had a Pokemon like, let's say they had a Pokemon like Enamorus, okay? Let's just remind you what the speed tier of Enamorus is. It is a good old 106, okay? Now let's compare that to the speed tiers in my team. Now, Enamorus 106, it's already slower than Frostlass, and it's already slower than Thundurus, so you don't have to worry about outspeeding those Pokemon. But Enamorus does need to worry about outspeeding Simisear. So, in order to outspeed Simisear, I'm pretty sure Simisear is like 331 when it's max speed. Bingo. So, 331. Let's say that I have, and we'll, what are we doing here? There we go. 332, you outspeed that. I'll just make sure I'm timid, and boom, I get 40 HP left over, okay? This is what Enamorus is forced to do against my current team, because I have a Simisear at 101 speed. Yeah. Now, let's say that I didn't have Simisear. Let's say that the 101 speed tier didn't exist. What would my team look like then? Now Enamorus only has to worry about outspeeding Lucario at base 90 speed. And Lucario at base 90 speed, well, it's slower than Simisear. How much slower? Isn't it like 2? No. Oh, I forget. 306. Okay, yeah. So, Lucario is at 306. What does that mean for Enamorus now that it doesn't have to outspeed Simisear? 306 means that it gets all this EVs back. Whoa, 308. And now my Enamorus can afford to run much more HP. Or, guess what? Smart Showdown. It can even go this way. Wait, what? Oh. Alright, yeah, I can afford to be modest. Right? Now Enamorus can afford to be modest and even have 16 HP left over. And still outspeed Lucario. Now let's go back again. Let's say that I don't have Lucario on my team either. Now the next speed tier you have to worry about is Mabostiff at 85. That's going to be only 295 speed, so I get to save even more EVs. And I get to be even more bulky. Now I want to really explain the difference to you between the speed tiers that just occurred. Boom. Boom. So, this is the Enamorus that is forced to outspeed my Simisear. And this is the Enamorus that only needs to outspeed my Mabostiff. If I didn't have Simisear at 101 HP and Lucario at 90, then I might have to fight a modest Enamorus. But because my speed tiers are well spread out, I force Enamorus to invest more into speed, and I only have to fight a timid Enamorus. And this is a big difference. Just by having good speed tiers, I force my opponents to invest more into speed and less into bulk and less into special attack. Because my speed tiers are well distributed, the Pokemon that fall in between them are forced to invest more into speed, and thus, yes, I just repeated myself. It's really important that you have good speed tiers, because if I drafted Pokemon that were slower than Mabostiff, maybe down here, then I would have to fight stronger Pokemon. Even when I'm fighting the same Pokemon, it's the same Enamorus. This is still Enamorus, but one of these Enamorus is taking advantage of my poor speed tiers, and as a result it's stronger and bulkier and still outspeeds everything it needs to. And the other Enamorus is weaker and frailer, just because I forced it to invest more into speed with good speed tiers. So it's crucially important that your speed tiers are well distributed so that every Pokemon that you fight is forced to invest more of its points into speed. That's just one really important aspect that makes this, it's an important aspect of every draft team, but it's one part of what makes this a good draft team. Let's take a look at my speed control. I remember drafting Thundurus. I forget exactly what values the points were. Needless to say, I spent a lot of my budget drafting Thundurus and drafting Gyarados as a Terra Captain. This was my speed control. This was my fast sweeper, the Terra Gyarados. And boy, Gyarados got a lot of work done with Terra, DD, Moxie. It was a threat. This is a good example of where I spent a lot of my points on where it mattered, on the expensive stuff like Thunderous and Gyarados. Because Thunderous has Prankster T-Wave, and that can slow opponents down. It also just has a great natural speed tier. Frostlass also has a decent natural speed tier. It's cheaper because its attacking stats are a lot lower, but I used it more for the utility of spikes and potentially taunt and destiny bond. It also can spread status with Wisp and T-Wave, so that was its own useful Pokemon. And I just a lot of my Pokemon that I spent points on were sort of in the middle. Pokemon that were good enough to be respected, and so I still forced my opponents to prepare for them in the team builder. Especially my cheaper ones like Simisear and Toucannon. These are not like great Pokemon, but they're just strong enough or just bulky enough that you still like can't get rid of them easily, and you still need to respect them. I had a utility Rapid Spinner in Sarita. Again, I didn't spend too many points on it, but it's still a decently good Pokemon. 72 speed, 120 attack. That is still pure grass typing with a cool ability like Queenly Majesty. That's a respectable Pokemon that I was comfortable bringing most weeks. Likewise, for Stealth Rocks, I had Rhyperior. For Spikes, I had Frostlass. T-Spikes, I had Dragalge. I didn't just focus one Pokemon to sort of be burdened with utility. I spread it out nicely because in the example I used, like Crate Tusk versus Donphan versus Sandslash, when these Pokemon are able to find free turns through good positioning to use Rapid Spin or Stealth Rock, they can only do one of those at a time, right? You get one free turn to click Rapid Spin, and then you need to position yourself again for Great Tusk to get another free turn to use Stealth Rock with good positioning. When you spread the utility out a little bit more, it's a lot easier for Rhyperior to find a free turn to Stealth Rock, Serena to find a free turn to Rapid Spin, Dragalge to find a free turn to T-Spike, as opposed to Great Tusk finding two free turns to both Rapid Spin and Stealth Rock, and then maybe your opponent sets Stealth Rock in between, and okay, and I have to Rapid Spin again. I would recommend spreading your utility out more, and I did a pretty good job at this with this draft. The slow pivots, not as great of a job with this one, but Dragalge was the main one with Flip Turn, but I could also do it to a lesser extent with U-Turn on Serena. And Volt Switch Thunderous was a fast pivot, the fast frail attacker that can get out of a bad position. Thunderous also has U-Turn for what it's worth if I'm fighting electric communities that I can't get around. So that was a good example of a fast pivot. And a good example of a fast sweeper, Lucario has some access to stuff like Bullet Punch, Extreme Speed, with Swords Dance, and or on the special side, it has Nasty Plot with Vacuum Wave. I used a Sub-Select Nasty Plot Simisear one week that paired well with Blaze. That was a pretty cool sweep, but a lot of weeks it was Terra Captain, Gyarados with Dragon Dance and Moxie getting out of hand. The fast sweepers are very, very dangerous, and this team abused one very good one very well. So that was also important. Another important thing is the type chart. Take a look at my weaknesses. My big flaw, in my opinion, not my best showing. I had 5 rock weeks and only 2 resists, which means I had 3 more weaknesses than resists. However, I will say that this is a little bit exaggerated because my 2 lowest value Pokemon, Simisear and Toucannon, are both weak to rock, and I'm not bringing both of those every week. If you ignore those Pokemon, the rock weaknesses comes down to like 3 and 2 resists. It's a lot more manageable. Same thing for the ice resist. So the defensive type chart, again, Draft Zone is cool for being able to show you this kind of stats. It's really important that you have resistances, a good amount of resistances to every type, and you don't have a huge amount of weaknesses to any one type. in my case, I was a little bit dicey with Rock and Ice, but it was okay because I had good resists. So again, that is I would value your defensive profile a lot less than I would value first your speed control, and then second your fast sweepers, and then third your utility pieces. Those, in my opinion, are the most important things. Oh yes, I want to talk also to a lesser extent on the importance of Terra. We are at the end of Generation 9, so I think this little segment, this little side rant, will have a lot less shelf life than the other aspects of this video should. But it is really Terra is an incredibly powerful mechanic and an incredibly important resource for your team. It's really important that you remember only one Pokemon can Terra at a time. So if you go to the draft board again and you look at Pokemon like Electrode, honestly, Electrode's a really good Terra Captain. I don't know. Let's just throw some smoke. Jump Love, come on, buddy. Do you really want to spend your Terastallization every game on Jump Bluff? The answer is no. That is a waste. A good Terra Captain, on the other hand, is something like your boy Arcaludon. What am I organized by? Oh, speed. Yeah. Arcaludon. Big old Arcaludon. And I want to compare and contrast these two drafts, because in my current draft, I broke the rules. I did not follow my own rules when I drafted this team, and you can immediately see that with my speed tiers. Holy crap. 4 Pokemon at 85, 2 at 70, 2 at 60, and honestly, Horsey, that was a 1-pointer that I am almost certainly never going to bring. I hate drafting those 1-pointers, but I had to do it to make the budget work. So this was a team where I broke the rules when it comes to drafting. When it comes to relying on conditions like weather, like rain or sun or sand, or other terrains like grassy, psychic terrain, etc. These are conditions that it's possible for your opponent to interrupt you, and it's possible for your opponent to cripple you from there. So you really need to be careful about leaning in to these sort of field conditions too much. It's always best to be, in my opinion, it's always best to be weatherless. It's best to just be flexible. I broke that rule too. But why? Why did I break the rules? Why did I break my own rules so badly? And in my opinion, I'm 4-1 right now. This team is still really, really good, despite all the rules I broke. And the reason that is because I dropped 23 points on a Terra Captain Arcaludon. That is almost a quarter of my budget. But what makes Arcaludon such a good Terra Captain? Why did I break all the rules in order to try and fit this into my budget and make it work? I did this because Electroshot in Rain is incredibly broken. I just want to show you what this move does. Yeah, it is 130 base power, 100 accuracy, already excellent, but it's a 2-turn charge move where it raises your special attack by 1 stage on the first turn and then fires on the second turn. Critically, the special attack boost happens first, so when the move fires, it is at +1 special attack. Under the rain, this move fires immediately, meaning that you increase your special attack by +1 and attack on the same turn. That is incredible stuff. Moreover, the Steel Dragon typing lends itself excellently to Rain as a whole by resisting water, grass, and electric. And Arcaludon is just an insane Pokemon. because it has an excellent ability in stamina. It has fantastic stats. The Spadef is kind of weak, but you can patch it up with an Assault Vest. It is a Pokemon that can set up and quote unquote sweep without without needing any free turns. And it's just disgusting. Similarly, the other Pokemon that I spent a ton of points on is Quaquaval at 16. And I really liked the look of Quaquaval because under the rain with an Aqua Step, if I kill something with Aqua Step, I'm getting +1 speed and +1 attack off the rip. That is a Dragon Dance that I did not need a free turn to grab. It's a Dragon Dance I got just by attacking. And under the rain, this thing's Aqua Steps can be really strong, and it's really hard to deny a kill from Quaquaval. So these two Pokemon, under the rain, I saw a ton of potential in. And so, especially with Terra Captain Archaludon, I decided to spend a lot of money on these Pokemon. And so far, the rest of it, I had to kind of patch together, spend a little bit of points on Politoed. Toxicroak was only worth 5. Golduck is only worth 2. Which, in my opinion, is a steal because it's a swift swimmer with 85 speed. 95 special attack is kind of low, but it has access to Nasty Plot, which is super fantastic. I think the success of this draft comes more so not only in its superstars, quote unquote, the superstars, Quaquaval and Archaludon, but also its ability to find value in the very affordable budget Pokemon like Toxicroak and Golduck. These are Pokemon that perform well above their point value due to the rain condition I'm able to provide. So this is a draft, again. It breaks the rules because these speed tiers are so easy to work around. But it still works just because of the power of the superstars, in my opinion. And it's able to work because of the value that like the cheaper Pokemon can provide. Sure, you can ignore Horsey, but every single other of these 9 Pokemon are valid threats that you have to try and account for. And under the rain, it's challenging. So let's take a look at the type chart too. I actually did not have too many weaknesses on this front. I think it's notable that I don't have a ground type. I would recommend having a ground type on pretty much every draft, but just for the importance of having an immunity to Volt Switch. But Kilowattrel has Volt Absorb, so I just kind of like, it's okay. I also have some slow pivots that can provide me some really useful defensive coverage, like Decidueye with the slow U-turn, Incineroar has a slow U-turn, slow parting shot. Kilowattrel has a Volt Switch. I haven't actually clicked Flip Turn with Quaquaval yet, but it could do that. These are good. These are good pivots to help me reposition Archaludon and Quaquaval and Kilowattrel in to like get some damage done. Oh, Jirachi can U-turn too. Yeah. Oh, Golduck can also Flip Turn. There you go. Fast pivots. This is a pretty good draft, I would say. I was very happy with this draft, especially because the first draft that I put together for the season 3, it came out really poorly, and I actually picked up every single one of these Pokemon was left over. I didn't plan on drafting Rain. I just sort of put together Rain from the leftovers of everyone else's draft, and I think it came out pretty good. So hopefully I will upload some battles and some videos later to try and break down some concepts, break down how I prepare for a team and what kind of decisions goes through my head when I click certain buttons in any given turn. But I think I wanted to get this video out first to sort of give you an understanding of what I look for in a draft and how I prepare for my opponents. So I think this was it. Yeah, I think I got through everything I wanted to say in terms of how to put together a good draft. This is a video that I may come back to make some addendums on or make some changes, some edits. If I do, I'll probably just make another video because I'm not editing this. But as I continue to play draft, I may grow, I may have my opinions changed, and I might have to come back and correct myself. But I think that I got through everything I wanted to get through. So it's really important that you, again, consider versatility, consider speed control, offense, utility, hazard removal, setting hazards, slow pivots, making sure you don't have too many weaknesses on any one type, and fit it all in your budget. Make sure you abuse Terra, whatever other mechanic that your draft is using, and you should be all set. So I have no idea when my next video will come out, but I hope that you enjoyed this one. See you next time.